Stop scrolling. I need 30 seconds of your attention before you decide whether this is worth your time. Right now, somewhere in America, someone just quit. They quit the business they started 9 months ago. They quit the diet they swore would be different this time. They quit the relationship they told everyone was the one. And they're sitting with that hollow feeling, the kind that lives in your chest like a stone, telling themselves it was the right call, that they were being realistic, that they'll start fresh on Monday. Here's the brutal truth. Monday isn't coming for quitters, not because they're bad people, not because they lack potential, but because no one ever taught them the difference between giving up and strategically persisting, between stubborn suffering and intelligent endurance. This book is not a motivational speech. Motivation is a candle, beautiful, warm, temporary. What you're about to read is How to Build a Fireplace, something that generates heat regardless of the weather outside. You are going to learn how champions think, not in vague, inspirational terms, but in concrete, neurological, behavioral terms. You're going to understand why your brain defaults to quitting, how to rewire it through daily practice, and what specific actions transform ordinary people into the kind of human beings who finish what they start. This is the mind you were always capable of building. You just haven't started yet. Let's fix that. Right now. The habit you didn't know you were building. Most people believe quitting is a decision, a single moment where they weigh the pros and cons, consider their options, and choose to walk away. They're wrong. Quitting is a habit, and there's a very good chance you've been practicing it for years without realizing it. Think about the last time you started a workout program. How many weeks did it last? Think about the last big project you began with genuine excitement. Where is it now? Think about the resolution you made, not last January, but the one before that and the one before that. What happened? Every time you stopped, you told yourself a story. The timing was off. Life got in the way. It wasn't the right fit. You were being practical. But your brain wasn't listening to the story. Your brain was watching the behavior. The neural pathway. Nobody talks about neuroscience has shown us something uncomfortable. The brain builds pathways based on what we do, not what we intend. Every time you push through discomfort, you carve a groove into your neural architecture that says, this is who we are. We push through. Every time you quit when things get hard, you carve a different groove. This is who we are. We stop when it hurts. Most people have spent a decade carving the second groove. This isn't an insult, it's a diagnosis. And unlike most diagnoses, this one comes with a clear treatment plan. Here's what makes quitting particularly dangerous. It compounds. The first time you quit a goal after 2 weeks, it takes genuine discomfort to do it. There's guilt, there's internal resistance, but the second time, a little easier. The third time, you barely notice. By the 10th time, your brain doesn't even register it as failure. It just registers it as what happens next when things get hard. You've accidentally trained yourself to be a professional quitter. And the worst part? You've built an entire vocabulary to justify it. I'm being realistic. I'm protecting my mental health. I'm making space for better opportunities. These aren't lies, exactly. They're just the sophisticated language your untrained mind uses to dress up surrender as wisdom. The child who never quit. There's a scene that every human being on earth has lived through, and almost nobody remembers correctly. You were learning to walk. You fell again, you fell 100 times. You face-planted on carpet, hardwood, tile. You bruised your knees, bumped your head, and probably cried. And then, without anyone teaching you resilience, without a motivational speech, without a vision board, you got up and tried again. Nobody had to convince you. Nobody had to remind you of your why. You simply were not wired yet to accept falling as a final answer. That child is still inside you. The wiring is still there. What happened is that years of conditioning layered over it. Years of being taught that failure is shameful, that struggle means you're not cut out for something, that the smart move is always the comfortable move. But wiring doesn't disappear. It gets buried. And the work of building a never-quit mindset is, at its core, excavation work. The champion's relationship with difficulty. Champions, in business, in athletics, in art, in life, don't avoid the moments when quitting seems rational. They face the same storms everyone else faces. The difference is in what those storms mean to them. An average person facing a wall sees a sign that says, "Go back." A champion sees a sign that says, "You're getting close." This isn't wishful thinking or toxic positivity. It's strategic reframing, a trained cognitive skill that anyone can develop. Champions understand, usually through hard-won experience, that the moments when everything in you screams stop are precisely the moments that separate the people who succeed from the people who almost succeeded. Every elite performer you've ever admired has a story, usually multiple stories, about the moment they nearly quit. The musician who was rejected by every label, the entrepreneur whose first 3 businesses failed, the athlete who was told they weren't big enough, fast enough, talented enough. What made them different wasn't that they felt less doubt. They felt exactly as much doubt. They simply didn't obey it. Rewiring starts. Today, here's the practical truth. You cannot change your relationship with quitting through a single act of heroic willpower. That's not how the brain works. The brain responds to patterns, not to dramatic moments. You change your quit habit the same way you built it, through repetition. Except this time, the repetition goes the other direction. Every time you finish a workout you wanted to stop halfway through, you're making a deposit. Every time you complete a task you'd rather put off until tomorrow, you're making a deposit. Every time you follow through on a commitment when nobody would notice if you didn't. You are literally rewiring your brain. You are carving a new groove. You are building new evidence about who you are. And evidence is everything. Your brain is a storytelling machine, and it tells stories based on what it observes about your behavior. Start behaving like someone who doesn't quit, and your brain will eventually, inevitably, start telling a different story about you. The question isn't whether you can change this. The neuroscience is unambiguous. You absolutely can. The question is whether you're willing to start small, stay consistent, and trust that the compound effect of daily persistence is building something extraordinary beneath the surface, even when you can't see it yet. Start today, not Monday, not next month. Today. Pick one thing you've been avoiding, not the biggest thing, not the most important thing, just one small thing that your old habit would tell you to skip. Do it anyway. Finish it. Notice how it feels. That feeling, that quiet satisfaction of having kept your word to yourself, is the first brick in the foundation of a mind that never gives up. The architecture of mental strength. Here is something most people get dangerously wrong about mental toughness. They think it's built in a crisis. They believe that when the big moment comes, the life-altering challenge, the defining test, the true crisis, something will rise up inside them. Some reservoir of strength they didn't know they had. Some inner champion who was just waiting for a worthy challenge. And sometimes, miraculously, something does rise up. But here's what that something actually is. It's the accumulated residue of 10,000 small decisions you made when the stakes were low. It's the mental muscle you built on ordinary Tuesday mornings when nobody was watching and there was no dramatic story to tell. Mental strength is not built in crisis. It is revealed in crisis. The building happens quietly, daily, in the unremarkable moments that most people dismiss as inconsequential. The compounding power of small wins. Think about compound interest for a moment. $1 invested at a modest interest rate, left alone, becomes something remarkable over time. Not because any single day was transformative, but because each day built on the last. Mental strength compounds exactly the same way. When you get up at the time you said you would instead of hitting snooze, that's not just 5 extra minutes. That's evidence to your brain that your word means something. When you complete a task you'd rather postpone, that's not just efficiency. That's a rep in the gym of self-trust. When you choose the difficult conversation over the comfortable silence, that's not just communication. That's character construction. These moments don't feel significant. That's exactly why most people skip them. And skipping them is exactly why most people find themselves unprepared when the real tests arrive. Your morning. The training ground. Nobody uses the first hour of your day is the most underutilized asset in personal development. Before the world gets its hooks into your attention, before emails, notifications, other people's agendas, you have a window of pure self-determination. What you choose to do with that window sends a message to your brain about who's in charge of your life. Set a wake-up time, not a wake-up window, a time, and honor it, not when you feel rested, not when you slept well, not when you have something exciting to get up for. Every single morning. This one discipline, practiced consistently, does something remarkable. It trains your brain to understand that your decisions are not negotiable based on your mood. That is the foundation of mental strength. Then build on it. Make your bed. Not because it matters cosmically, but because it means your first act of every day is completing something. It means you start with a win. Clean up after yourself immediately. Keep micro-promises you make in conversation. Return the call you said you'd return. Send the message you said you'd send. These aren't just courtesies. They're training sessions for the part of your brain that decides whether or not you can be trusted, including trusted by yourself. Physical discomfort as mental training. One of the most effective shortcuts to mental strength is deliberately choosing physical discomfort. When you're mid-workout and everything in your body is begging you to stop, and you complete the set anyway, you're not just building a stronger body. You're teaching your nervous system a lesson that transfers to every area of your life. Feelings are not facts, and discomfort is not a stop sign. Cold showers, running when it's raining, choosing stairs over elevators, carrying groceries instead of pushing a cart. These are not about efficiency. They are about practicing the choice of difficulty over comfort so that when it matters, when the difficulty is your career, your relationship, your dream, you already have thousands of reps of choosing hard over easy. The key principle here is consistency over intensity. 10 push-ups every single morning for a year will build more mental strength than 500 push-ups done once in a burst of enthusiasm. Your brain doesn't respect sporadic heroism. It responds to reliable patterns. What you don't do matters. As much as what you do, mental strength has a defensive component that almost nobody talks about. Every time you resist checking your phone when you should be focused, you're building concentration. Every time you don't react to criticism with defensiveness, you're building emotional resilience. Every time you refuse to make an excuse when you underperform, you're building accountability. Every time you don't take the easy exit when a hard conversation is needed, you're building integrity. Mental strength isn't just about doing difficult things. It's about not doing easy things that betray your goals and your character. The identity feedback loop. Here's where the psychology becomes truly fascinating. Your brain is constantly watching your behavior and drawing conclusions about who you are, not who you want to be, not who you aspire to be, who you are, based on evidence. When you keep a small promise to yourself, your brain notes. We are someone who follows through. When you complete a task despite resistance, your brain notes. We are someone who finishes things. When you push through discomfort repeatedly, your brain begins to register persistence as part of your identity, not as an effort you're making, but as a trait you possess. This is the feedback loop that champions have running in their favor, and you can start running it today. After each small win, don't just move on to the next thing. Pause for 10 seconds. Say it out loud, even quietly. I said I would do that, and I did. That's not arrogance. That's identity construction. You're teaching your subconscious mind that you are someone who can be counted on, especially by yourself. Track your wins simply: a checkmark on a calendar, a note in your phone, a small dot in a journal. Make your consistency visible, because what's visible becomes memorable, and what's memorable becomes motivating. The strongest people you will ever meet are not people who were born with superior willpower. They are people who had the patience and wisdom to build it one small decision at a time. They showed up when it was inconvenient. They finished when they were tired. They started again when they failed. And over time, their brains rewired. Yours will too. You just have to start small, stay consistent, and trust the architecture. Obstacles are not in your way. They are the way. There's a moment that almost every person pursuing a meaningful goal eventually reaches. The moment when the obstacle appears, and it is real, significant, undeniable. It isn't a minor inconvenience. It's the kind of wall that stops people, the kind that has stopped you before. In that moment, your brain will do what it was designed to do. Interpret the obstacle as a threat. Flood your system with stress hormones. Scan urgently for the exit. Whisper, or sometimes shout, that this is a sign, that you should turn back, that maybe this wasn't meant for you. What your brain will not naturally do, unless you've trained it, is see the obstacle as useful information, as a growth stimulus, as precisely the challenge you needed to encounter in order to become the person capable of achieving what you set out to achieve. This reframing isn't just positive thinking, it's strategic intelligence, and it changes everything. The gym your brain doesn't know. It's in when you lift weights. The resistance is not your enemy. The resistance is the workout. Without the weight pushing back, no muscle develops. The breakdown of muscle fiber under load is the signal your body uses to build new, stronger tissue. Obstacles work on your mind the same way. Every obstacle you face is tearing down a mental limitation, a belief you held about what you could handle, what you were capable of, what was possible for you. If you respond with persistence, that limitation rebuilds at a higher level. You become more capable, not despite the obstacle, but because of it. The person who learns to genuinely see obstacles this way, not as a performance, not as forced optimism, but as a deeply held strategic belief, develops an advantage that is almost impossible to overcome. They become genuinely excited by challenge, not because they're masochists, but because they've experienced enough times how difficulty leads to capability, how struggle leads to strength. They've made the connection most people miss. The video game principle. Think about how people approach video games. When a player reaches a difficult level, one that takes multiple attempts, that requires learning from failure, that pushes the boundaries of current skill, they don't call it a sign they should stop playing. They lean in. They try different strategies. They replay the failed section to understand what they missed. They know that the difficulty is proportional to the reward, and that the skill required for this level is preparing them for everything that comes after. Your life operates on exactly this principle. Every challenging stretch you're in is developing the exact skills you need for the next level of your journey. The difficult conversation you're avoiding is developing your communication skills. The financial struggle you're navigating is developing your resourcefulness. The rejection you experienced is developing your resilience. Most people never make this connection because they're too close to the pain to see the purpose. Step back far enough, and the pattern becomes undeniable. What every successful person's story has in common, spend an hour reading the detailed biography of any person you genuinely admire. Any entrepreneur, athlete, artist, leader, or ordinary human being who achieved something extraordinary. And you will find it. The obstacle that nearly broke them, the moment that looked, from the outside and often from the inside, like the end, the failed startup that wiped out their savings and left them starting from zero in their 30s, the injury that ended what everyone said was their career, the devastating personal loss that derailed years of progress, the rejection so complete it seemed like a verdict on their entire life. And then, after it, the thing that only became possible because of the obstacle, the pivot that led to the real business, the recovery that built superhuman mental toughness, the crisis that clarified what actually mattered. These obstacles weren't detours around the path to success. They were the path to success. The Obstacle Journal. Here is a practical tool that will change how your brain processes difficulty. Keep an obstacle journal. Whenever you face a significant challenge, write down these questions and answer them honestly. What capability is this obstacle requiring me to develop? What weakness is it exposing that needs to be strengthened? What would I know about myself that I currently don't know if I pushed through this? What kind of person do I become if I overcome this? This isn't journaling for emotional catharsis, although that may happen. This is training your brain to look for the value in difficulty automatically. Over time, this practice rewires your initial response to obstacles, from threat detection to opportunity analysis. When you overcome a genuinely difficult obstacle, one that required you to grow, that stretched you beyond your previous limits, celebrate it differently than you celebrate easy victories, because what you accomplished wasn't just solving a problem. You upgraded your capacity to handle problems. You became someone capable of achieving things you weren't capable of before. That's not a small thing. That is exactly how extraordinary lives are built. The counterintuitive truth about difficulty: high achievers across every field share a secret that looks, from the outside, like arrogance or delusion. They actually prefer the version of their journey that includes significant obstacles, not because they enjoy suffering, but because they understand, viscerally, that obstacles are what separate them from their competition. While others quit, they persist. While others complain, they adapt. While others look for someone to blame, they look for a path forward. They have learned, through experience, through failure, through the repeated discovery that they were more capable than they thought, that obstacles don't prevent them from reaching their destination. Obstacles are the destination. They are the transformation. They are the education. Your obstacles right now are calibrated to your current level. They're not bigger than you can handle, though they may feel that way. They're exactly large enough to require you to grow. The discomfort you feel is not a warning that you're on the wrong path. It's confirmation that you're on the growth path. Stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" Start asking, "What is this making me into?" That single shift, from victim to student, is the moment your mind begins to become genuinely unstoppable. The voice in your head is lying to you. Right now, as you read this, there is a voice in your mind. You've heard it your whole life. It has an opinion about everything, about this book, about whether any of this will work for you specifically, about whether you're really capable of the changes we're discussing. During ordinary moments, this voice is manageable. But when you face real difficulty, when the stakes are high, the progress is slow, the obstacles are multiplying, this voice gets loud. And what it says with remarkable consistency is some version of the same message: give up. It dresses this message in different clothes. Sometimes it sounds like reason. Be realistic about your limitations. Sometimes it sounds like wisdom. Know when to cut your losses. Sometimes it sounds like self-care. You're doing too much. It's okay to rest. Sometimes it sounds like your own common sense speaking truth to your ambition. But here's what it actually is: fear wearing a suit. It is the voice of your untrained mind, the part of you that has learned, through years of conditioning, that discomfort equals danger, and the safest response to either is retreat. This voice is not your friend, it is not your advisor, and it is most definitely not the truth. The anatomy of the quitting voice. The quitting voice has a consistent vocabulary. Learning to recognize its phrases is the first step to stripping it of its power. This is too hard. Translation: this is harder than I expected, and I haven't trained myself to push through that gap. You're not good enough. Translation: you're not good enough yet in your current form, with your current level of skill. Yet. Yet is the word the quitting voice always leaves out. Nobody believes in you. Translation: the people immediately around you don't share your vision. That has been true of virtually every person who ever achieved anything significant. You've tried enough. Translation: you've tried enough. Times in ways that didn't work, which means you need different approaches, not fewer attempts. It's time to be realistic. Translation: it's time to adjust your expectations down to match your current level of courage. None of these are verdicts. They are fear responses. Recognizing them as such, immediately, automatically, is a skill that will serve you for the rest of your life. The one rule for dealing with the quitting voice. Here is the most important rule, and it runs counter to what most people try. Do not debate with the quitting voice. Most people, when the voice starts talking, engage with it. They argue. They try to counter its logic with better logic. They attempt to reason their way through the doubt. This is a mistake. The quitting voice doesn't want a conversation. It wants capitulation. Every moment you spend engaging with it, analyzing its arguments, trying to decide whether it has a point, every one of those moments is a moment you're not taking action. And action is the only thing that silences the voice. The moment you hear it, take action toward your goal. Don't respond to it. Don't acknowledge it. Move your body. Make the call. Write the sentence. Send the email. Do the next thing. Physical movement is one of the most powerful tools against the quitting voice for a neurological reason. It changes your state. Stress hormones that support the voice's message begin to clear. Dopamine and norepinephrine, chemicals associated with purpose and forward motion, begin to rise. The voice doesn't disappear, but it loses its grip. The quitting voice feeds on stillness and isolation. It grows loudest when you're alone, when you're not moving, when you're in your head instead of in action. Counter this by staying in motion, staying connected, staying engaged. Don't give the voice the conditions it needs to dominate. The voice gets loudest right before the breakthrough. This is perhaps the single most important thing you will read in this entire book. The quitting voice intensifies specifically when you are closest to breakthrough. Think about that. The voice knows something your conscious mind often doesn't, that persistence leads to success. So it makes its most desperate argument when the outcome you've been working toward is nearest. It knows that if it can stop you here, in this moment, when giving up seems most rational, when the pain is at its peak and the reward is still not visible, it has won. Countless people have quit the thing they spent years working toward, not when progress was minimal, but when they were 1 month away from the moment everything would have changed. They didn't know how close they were. The quitting voice made sure of it. The corollary to this insight is powerful. When the voice gets loudest, lean in harder. Intensity of internal resistance is often a signal that you're approaching something significant. It's your brain working against you because it knows something important is at stake. Learn to read the voice's desperation as a signal, not to quit, but to persist with even greater determination. Building inner coaching. The alternative to the quitting voice is not silence. It's a different voice, one you build deliberately, through practice, the way you'd build any other skill. Think about the best coach you've ever had, or the best coach you can imagine. Not the one who told you everything was perfect, the one who believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself, who acknowledged reality without surrendering to it, who saw your current limitations and your future potential simultaneously and refused to confuse one with the other. That's the voice you're building. When your quitting voice says, "This is too hard," your coaching voice responds, "This is exactly as hard as it needs to be to make you better." When it says, "I can't handle this," your coaching voice says, "I can't handle this yet." And "yet" is the most important word in that sentence. When it says, "Nobody believes in me," your coaching voice says, "I believe in myself enough to continue. That's all I need right now." This internal coaching voice doesn't emerge automatically. It requires construction. Practice it daily, not just during hard times, but during ordinary ones. Speak to yourself the way you'd speak to someone you deeply care about who is facing a genuine challenge. Firm, honest, kind, solution-focused, and unfailingly committed to their continued effort. The conversations you have with yourself are the most influential conversations of your life. You're always listening. Make those conversations worth hearing. Pain is fuel, if you know how to burn it. There's a distinction that separates people who achieve meaningful things from people who perpetually prepare to achieve meaningful things. It's not talent. It's not resources. It's not even work ethic exactly. It's their relationship with pain. Most people treat pain as a stop sign. When they feel discomfort, physical, emotional, psychological, their entire system orients toward relief. Make it stop. Find the easier path. Exit the discomfort. This response is entirely natural. It is, in fact, exactly what your nervous system was designed to do in evolutionary terms. But your nervous system was designed for survival on the African savanna, not for building a business in 21st century America. The discomfort of rejection is not a predator. The pain of a difficult workout is not a wound. The frustration of slow progress is not a threat to your survival. Your brain, however, treats all of these with the same urgency, and unless you intervene, it will steer you away from all of them. The person who learns to use pain as fuel instead of treating it as a stop sign gains an extraordinary advantage. They are powered by the very thing that stops everyone else. Reframing the burn. When you're exercising and your muscles begin to burn, what is actually happening? Your muscle fibers are undergoing microscopic damage under the stress of exertion. This damage triggers a biological response. Your body floods the area with resources, repairs the damage, and builds the tissue back stronger than it was before. The burn is not a warning that something is going wrong. It is the signal that adaptation is occurring. Growth is happening. You are literally becoming more capable in real time. Emotional and psychological pain follows the same principle. The burn of rejection is the signal that your identity is being stress-tested, and if you don't retreat, it will rebuild stronger. The pain of failure is the signal that your assumptions are being corrected, and if you stay curious instead of defensive, you will emerge with more accurate beliefs about what works. The discomfort of sustained effort is the signal that you are in the zone where growth occurs, the place just beyond what's easy, just beyond what's automatic. The burn isn't telling you to stop. It's telling you that something important is happening. Changing your interpretation of physical discomfort is the first step because it's the most tangible and immediate. In your next workout, when the burn begins and your mind says stop, try replacing that thought with a single word. Good. Good, because this means it's working. Good, because this is where other people quit and I don't. Good, because I am building something here that pain cannot take away from me. Every successful person's secret collection. Ask any person who has built something genuinely significant in their life about the painful experiences that shaped them, and they will not speak of those experiences with resentment. With time and perspective, they will speak of them with something that resembles gratitude, not because they enjoyed the pain, not because suffering is noble, but because they understand with absolute clarity what those experiences did for them. The startup that failed completely and wiped out their savings taught them more about their industry, their judgment, and their character than years of success could have. The devastating rejection that seemed in the moment like the final verdict on their worth pushed them to improve in ways that no amount of encouragement would have motivated. The years of obscurity and struggle built the resilience that made them capable of handling success when it finally arrived. Because success has its own pressures, and only the people who have been forged in difficulty can withstand them. Pain contains information that comfort never provides. It is a diagnostic tool of extraordinary precision. Physical pain tells you where your body is weak. Emotional pain tells you where your psychological architecture needs reinforcement. The pain of failure tells you which of your beliefs about reality were incorrect. Most people treat this information as unwelcome noise. Champions treat it as signal. The conversion process. Using pain as fuel isn't passive. It requires a deliberate conversion process, a habit of mind you build through practice. When you experience a setback, a failure, a rejection, or any form of significant pain, run it through these questions. What accurate information is this giving me about what needs to change? What capacity is this building in me that I didn't have before? What do I now know that I didn't know before this happened that will make me more effective going forward? If someone who had already achieved what I'm working toward looked at this experience, what would they see that I'm currently missing? These questions transform the experience of pain from passive suffering to active extraction. You are mining the experience for its value. You are converting the raw material of difficulty into the fuel of forward motion. And that fuel doesn't dissipate the way emotional pain does when you simply try to cope with it. When you extract the lesson, when you identify the capability being built, when you find the information in the signal, the pain becomes purposeful. Purpose changes everything. Your pain tolerance is not fixed. Here is something your biology wants you to know. Pain tolerance, both physical and psychological, is not a fixed trait. It is a trained capacity. Every time you push through discomfort instead of avoiding it, your threshold rises. Every time you persist through difficulty instead of retreating, your capacity for endurance expands. Every time you use pain as motivation instead of making it an excuse, your psychological resilience increases. This is not a metaphor. This is measurable, neurological reality. The brain's capacity to tolerate discomfort, maintain function under stress, and return to focus after setbacks can all be developed through practice, the same way any other skill is developed. The practical implication is powerful. Start small. Practice tolerating minor discomfort with intention. Feel the hunger while waiting for a healthy meal, and use it as practice for commitment. Feel the fatigue during exercise and use it as practice for persistence. Feel the frustration of slow progress and use it as practice for patience. You're not just getting through those moments, you're raising your floor. And as your floor rises, things that would have stopped you before, the obstacles, the rejections, the setbacks that once felt like walls, begin to feel like manageable challenges instead. Pain cannot stop the person who has learned to fuel themselves with it, which means that person, the version of you who has built this skill, is, in the most literal sense, unstoppable. When everything falls apart, how to stay focused, not if, when. At some point in your pursuit of anything meaningful, things will fall apart in a serious way, not a minor setback, not a bad week, a genuine crisis, the kind that makes you question everything, that calls your entire strategy into doubt, that has legitimate, serious consequences if you fail to navigate it well. This is the chapter most people need most, and read least carefully because they assume they'll rise to the occasion when the time comes. They won't. Not without preparation, not without a framework, not without the mental training that makes focus possible when chaos is highest. Here's the hard truth about crisis. Your mind, under significant stress, reverts to its most deeply trained patterns. If you've trained it to scatter under pressure, it will scatter. If you've trained it to focus, it will focus. Crisis doesn't create character. It reveals it. And right now, while things are relatively calm, is when that character gets built. The first and most important move in any crisis, when everything starts falling apart, your instinct will tell you to speed up, to match the chaos with urgency, to scatter your attention across every problem simultaneously, to address everything at once because everything needs addressing. Resist this with everything you have. The more chaotic the external situation, the more deliberate your internal response must be. This is counterintuitive. It feels wrong. It can look, from the outside, like you're not taking the situation seriously. But it is the single most effective thing you can do. Get still. Not physically still necessarily. Move your body if it helps, but mentally still. Create a pause between stimulus and response. Even 30 seconds of deliberate stillness in the middle of a crisis changes the neurochemical environment of your decision-making. It activates the prefrontal cortex, the rational brain, and reduces the dominance of the amygdala, the fear brain. From stillness, you can think clearly. From panic, you can only react. Triage, the skill nobody teaches. In a genuine crisis, you face a reality that every emergency professional understands. You cannot address everything simultaneously, and attempting to do so means addressing nothing effectively. You must triage. Triage is the process of determining priority in the presence of multiple simultaneous needs. In medicine, it means treating the patient most likely to survive with intervention before the patient who will survive regardless. In your life, it means identifying the single issue that, if addressed first, creates the most leverage for everything else. Ask yourself these questions. What, if I address it first, makes every other problem either smaller or more manageable? What issue, if allowed to worsen, creates irreversible damage? What can wait 2 days without significant consequence? This isn't avoidance. It's strategic allocation of limited resources. Specifically, your attention, energy, and decision-making capacity, all of which are finite and all of which degrade under sustained crisis conditions. The person who focuses on one problem at a time in a crisis resolves every problem eventually. The person who tries to solve everything simultaneously usually resolves nothing. What to focus on when you can't fix everything? Here is something crisis has in common with all difficult periods. It pulls your attention aggressively toward what's wrong, what's broken, what's failing, what's threatening. Your mind, in this state, compiles a running list of everything that could go badly, everyone you might disappoint, every way the situation could deteriorate. This feels like preparation. It is not preparation. It is anxiety with a productivity mask on. The antidote is not pretending the problems don't exist. The antidote is training your attention deliberately toward what you can actually control. In any crisis, there will be things completely outside your control and things entirely within it. Your mind will naturally, obsessively attend to the former. Your power is in redirecting it to the latter. What can you do right now? What is within your reach today? What small action, even a marginal one, moves you slightly? Forward? Take that action, then identify the next one. The next step principle is not just motivational language. It is a practical cognitive tool. When your mind is overwhelmed by the scope of a crisis, it cannot generate productive action, but it can almost always identify one step, and one step, followed by another, is how every crisis in human history has been navigated. The long game in the middle of chaos crisis reveals something that most people only discover too late. What genuinely matters. When everything is stripped away, when the non-essential falls apart and you're left with what's core, you see with unusual clarity what's actually important. Your priorities, your values, your non-negotiables. Things that were obscured by busyness and distraction become unmistakable in crisis. The people who emerge from significant crisis stronger, not just intact, but genuinely more capable, more focused, more purposeful, are the people who used the crisis as information. Who asked, in the middle of the chaos, "What is this showing me about what matters most?" Who allowed the stripping away to be an education rather than just a loss? Crisis, navigated with this orientation, becomes an accelerant. It compresses years of growth into months. It clarifies what would have taken decades of comfortable living to reveal. This is not theoretical. It is the story of most remarkable lives. The crisis that could have ended the journey became the pivot point that defined it, but only because the person facing it had developed the mental architecture to stay focused long enough to see what the crisis was actually teaching them. Train this skill now. Practice staying focused during small disruptions, the days that don't go as planned, the minor crises that test your composure, the moments when you're pulled in multiple directions and need to choose. These are rehearsals. The performance will come. Make sure you're prepared for it. Systems. Over-motivation. The architecture of consistency. Motivation is the most overrated concept in the culture of personal development. We are obsessed with it. We seek it in speeches, books, videos, playlists, rituals. We chase it when it disappears. We credit it when things go well and blame its absence when things fall apart. And here's the fundamental problem with this obsession. Motivation is designed to be temporary. It is a neurological state, a temporary elevation in dopamine and norepinephrine associated with novelty, progress, or inspiration. It rises and falls based on your sleep, your blood sugar, your social interactions, the weather, and approximately 10,000 other variables you cannot reliably control. If your progress depends on motivation, you have built your future on sand. Champions, in every field, without exception, understand this. They don't wait to feel motivated. They don't rely on feeling motivated. They have built systems that produce consistent action regardless of how they feel. And those systems, running quietly in the background of their lives, create the consistent results that everyone else attributes to extraordinary willpower or talent. What a system actually is. A system is a series of specific actions that produce a predictable result, and more importantly, that operate automatically, independent of your emotional state. The critical distinction between a goal and a system. A goal is an outcome you desire. Lose 20 pounds, build a six-figure business, write a book. Goals are external, outcome-based, and dependent on factors you cannot entirely control. A system is a process you execute. Exercise for 30 minutes every morning. Spend 90 minutes daily on revenue-generating activities. Write 300 words each morning before checking email. Systems are internal, process-based, and entirely within your control. You cannot will yourself to lose 20 pounds through determination alone. But you can will yourself to lace up your shoes and walk out the door every morning. And if you do that consistently enough, the 20 pounds becomes an inevitable byproduct. This is the power of systems. They convert your goals from aspirations into mathematical certainties. Given enough time and consistency, well-designed systems produce the outcomes they're designed to produce. Not maybe, inevitably. Design for your worst day, not your best here, is where most people's system design fails. They design systems for the version of themselves that exists on good days. Motivated, well-rested, enthusiastic, with clear schedules and cooperative circumstances, and those systems work perfectly on good days. But good days are not what determines your progress. Your progress is determined by what you do on hard days. The days when you're tired and stressed and distracted and absolutely do not feel like executing your system. Your systems must be designed to survive your worst days. This means smaller than you think, lower than feels ambitious, less impressive than you'd like to announce. Instead of committing to a 2-hour workout routine, commit to 20 minutes every day, no exceptions. Instead of committing to write 1,000 words daily, commit to 200 every day, without exception. Instead of committing to an elaborate morning routine, commit to 3 things every morning, regardless of circumstances. The goal is not to impress yourself on the days you feel strong. The goal is to maintain the system on the days you feel weak, because the system maintains the momentum. The momentum maintains the identity, and the identity, in time, produces the extraordinary results. Triggers, stacking, and environmental design systems need triggers, specific cues that automatically initiate the behavior you want to perform. Without triggers, your system depends on remembering to execute it, which means it depends on willpower, which means it will fail under pressure. The most powerful triggers are attached to existing behaviors, things you already do without thinking. After I pour my morning coffee, I will read 1 page. After I sit down at my desk, I will write 300 words before opening my browser. Before I go to sleep, I will lay out my workout clothes. This after/before structure means the new behavior piggybacks on established patterns, dramatically increasing the likelihood of execution. Environmental design amplifies this effect. Your environment is either working for your systems or against them. If you want to eat better, the environment of your kitchen matters more than your willpower. If healthy food is visible, prepared, and accessible, and unhealthy food requires effort to reach, your default behavior shifts without requiring any decision. If you want to exercise consistently, having your workout clothes ready the night before removes 1 point of resistance. Removing friction from desirable behaviors and adding friction to undesirable ones is environmental architecture for your goals. The compound effect of systems. A person who writes 200 words every day for a year writes 73,000 words, a full-length book. A person who exercises for 20 minutes daily transforms their fitness over 6 months in ways that occasional intense sessions never achieve. A person who spends 30 minutes daily learning a skill masters it in ways that weekend crash courses cannot replicate. These outcomes seem extraordinary. They are anything but. They are simply the mathematical result of small, consistent actions compounded over time. The person who builds a reading system, 1 chapter per day, will read 18 to 25 books per year, while the person who tries to read more reads perhaps 2 or 3. The person with a savings system will have financial resources in 5 years that look miraculous to someone who saves when I have extra. The person who exercises consistently will have a body at 50 that looks like they have genetic advantages, when really they just had a system. Systems are not glamorous. They are not exciting to talk about at dinner. They do not generate the kind of inspiration that makes people share videos, but they are the actual mechanism by which consistent human beings achieve consistent results. Build yours. Start with 1. Make it small enough to execute on your worst day. Attach it to a trigger. Design your environment to support it. Track it simply. Execute it daily. The motivation will come and go. The system will still be there. And 36 months. From now, when people ask you how you achieved what you achieved, you'll have a simple, unsexy, completely true answer. I just showed up every day. Daily disciplines. The unglamorous path to unstoppable persistence is not built in a moment. It is not forged in a single dramatic choice. It is not created by one heroic act of endurance that everyone will remember and you'll tell your grandchildren about. Persistence is built in the accumulation of thousands of unremarkable moments where you did the small thing you said you'd do, especially when you didn't feel like it. This is the chapter most self-help books spend the least time on because it isn't exciting. There's no dramatic arc. There's no before and after transformation story. There's just Tuesday morning at 6 a.m. doing the thing you committed to in exactly the same unglamorous way you did it Monday morning and will do it Wednesday morning. And yet this, precisely this, is where champions are built. The identity built in private. Nobody is watching you make your bed. Nobody sees you put your dishes away immediately instead of leaving them for tomorrow. Nobody knows whether you returned the call you said you'd return or whether you let it slide just this once. But you know, and your brain knows. And these private moments, accumulated over months and years, build something that no external achievement can create. Trust in yourself. The kind of deep, cellular certainty that you are someone whose word means something, including your word to yourself, especially your word to yourself. This trust is the foundation of confidence that doesn't require external validation. It's the kind of self-assurance you can take into any room, any challenge, any moment of uncertainty, because it isn't dependent on how others see you. It's based on evidence you've collected over years about your own character. Small disciplines build this evidence. Not the small disciplines you perform for an audience, the ones you perform in private for no reason other than that you said you would. Physical disciplines as mental training. The body is an extraordinary laboratory for building mental persistence because the feedback is immediate and the discomfort is real. Take cold showers. Not because they're trendy and not because the scientific evidence for their specific health benefits is conclusive. Take them because every morning you will face a genuine moment of resistance, real physical discomfort, and you will choose to enter it anyway. You are training yourself in the most visceral possible way that resistance does not automatically mean retreat. Walk daily, regardless of weather. Not because walking is the best cardiovascular exercise, because committing to walk regardless of conditions trains your brain to execute regardless of conditions. The discipline isn't about the walking, it's about the regardless. Do 10 push-ups every morning, set a timer and stretch for 5 minutes every evening. These specific numbers don't matter. What matters is that you establish commitments that require daily execution and honor them without exception. The discipline of honoring them is the entire point. The physical benefits are secondary. The 4 domains of daily discipline. Building persistence through daily disciplines works across 4 primary domains, each of which trains a different dimension of your mental strength. Time-based disciplines train persistence in the absence of visible results. Commit to working on something for 15 minutes daily, regardless of progress. Commit to practicing a skill for 20 minutes, regardless of improvement. These disciplines build the capacity to persist through the plateau, the long, often discouragingly quiet phase between beginning something and becoming competent at it. Financial disciplines train delayed gratification. Save a small amount daily, even if it seems insignificant. Choose the less convenient option when it costs less. Bring your lunch instead of buying it 3 days a week. These disciplines build the persistence required for every form of long-term commitment, because every long-term commitment requires prioritizing future value over present comfort. Social disciplines train persistence in relationship and communication. Call 1 friend per week just to maintain the connection. Write 1 handwritten note per month. Have the difficult conversation you've been avoiding. These disciplines build the emotional persistence required for meaningful relationships that require sustained investment, honest communication, and the courage to engage with difficulty rather than withdraw from it. Learning disciplines train persistence through intellectual discomfort. Read 1 chapter daily. Practice 1 new skill for 10 minutes. Memorize 1 new piece of information. These disciplines train your mind to persist through confusion, frustration, and the discomfort of not knowing, which is the permanent condition of anyone who is genuinely growing. Consistency over intensity, the principle that changes everything. Here is the principle that most people intellectually understand and almost nobody actually applies. Consistency produces more than intensity. A 5-minute walk every single day for a year builds more mental toughness, more metabolic adaptation, and more identity-based momentum than a 3-hour workout done once a month. 10 daily push-ups build more than 100 push-ups done twice a week. Reading 10 pages every single night without exception builds more reading habit, more knowledge retention, and more intellectual confidence than marathon reading sessions on occasional weekends. Your brain responds to patterns, not to impressive single-point performances. It is looking for what you do reliably, not what you do heroically. And it builds its story about who you are, its identity file about your character, from the reliable patterns, not the heroic exceptions. This is enormously liberating. It means you don't have to be impressive every day. You just have to be present every day. You don't have to perform at a high level daily. You just have to show up daily. The standard is not excellence. The standard is continuity. Excellence will follow over time as a natural byproduct of continuity. But continuity comes first. Start with 1 discipline today. Make it small enough that there's no legitimate excuse not to do it. Make it specific enough that you'll know clearly whether you did it or not. Attach it to a trigger. Track it with a simple mark. And commit to 30 days of unbroken continuity. 30 days from now, you will not be the same person who started. Not because 30 days is enough time to achieve extraordinary outcomes, but because 30 days of unbroken follow-through will have changed your evidence about yourself. Your brain will have updated its story. And that story, the story your brain tells about who you are, is the most powerful force in determining what you will ultimately achieve. Setbacks are setups, the comeback architecture. There is a word hidden inside the word setback that almost everyone misses. Set back, not set down, not set out, not set aside permanently, set back, which implies a direction, backward from where you were, not away from where you're going, temporarily, directionally, backward, with the assumption of forward movement built into the language itself. The setback is a temporary repositioning. It is not a final destination unless you choose to make it one. This distinction between a pause and an ending, between a retreat and a rout, between a setback and a permanent defeat, is one of the most important mental distinctions you will ever internalize. Because your relationship with setbacks doesn't just determine how you feel about them, it determines what they actually do to you. Interpreted one way, setbacks weaken you. Interpreted another way, they make you. The same experience depending entirely on your frame. What setbacks actually do. Setbacks perform a function that success is incapable of performing. Success confirms your strengths. Setbacks reveal your weaknesses. Success reinforces what works. Setbacks expose what doesn't. Success tells you that your current approach is good enough. Setbacks tell you that your current approach is insufficient. And in telling you this, they provide the exact information you need to grow. Without setbacks, you would advance with blind spots that would eventually cause much larger failures. The business that fails at the seed stage fails cheaply and early. The business that fails because its founder never developed the skills exposed by the seed failure fails at scale, at enormous personal and financial cost. The early setback, painful as it is, was the protection. This is not a reframe designed to make you feel better about failing. It is an accurate description of how growth actually works. Setbacks are not interruptions to your development, they are components of it. The question is never whether setbacks will happen. They will. The question is what you will be doing with them when they arrive. The Setup Comeback Framework. Here is a practical framework for converting setbacks into accelerants. Step 1. Acknowledge without drama or denial. The setback is real. Don't minimize it. Don't catastrophize it. Simply see it clearly. What happened, what the actual consequences are, what the accurate assessment of the situation is. Most people either deny the severity, it's fine, it'll work out, or catastrophize it, this ruins everything. Neither response is useful. Clear-eyed acknowledgement is the starting point for effective response. Step 2. Extract the lesson. Ask specifically, what accurate information does this give me about what needs to change? Not what went wrong in a self-critical sense, but what the experience is teaching you about your approach, your assumptions, your gaps in skill or knowledge or preparation. Step 3. Identify the path forward. Based on what you've learned, what specifically needs to change? What needs to be developed, acquired, adjusted, or approached differently? This step converts the lesson from abstract insight to concrete direction. Step 4. Create a plan and start immediately. Not tomorrow, not after you've processed the setback emotionally. As soon as you have a direction, take a step in it, even a small one. The movement itself begins to shift your mental state from reactive to proactive, from victim to agent. Step 5. Document the story. Record what happened, what you learned, and what you changed. This documentation serves two functions. It forces clarity in the moment, and it becomes evidence you can return to when future setbacks threaten to feel final. The timing. Truth about comebacks. The comeback is always proportional to the setback. This is not inspirational language. It is operational reality. Small setbacks set you up for small comebacks. Large setbacks, navigated with intelligence and persistence, set you up for large comebacks. This is because large setbacks require large growth, and large growth enables large achievements. The depth of your current difficulty genuinely does predict the height of your eventual triumph. If, and only if, you choose to learn from it rather than simply survive it. If you experience the loss without extracting the lesson, you've paid the price without receiving the value. That is the actual tragedy of most setbacks. Not that they happened, but that they happened and nothing was learned. Don't pay for setbacks and pocket nothing in return. Extract everything from them, every uncomfortable truth about your approach, every gap in your preparation, every belief about yourself or your market or your situation that turned out to be inaccurate. These extractions are not just consolation prizes, they are the foundation of your next attempt, which, because of what you've learned, has a dramatically higher probability of success than the attempt that produced the setback. The spring must be compressed before it can jump. The bow must be pulled back before the arrow can fly. Your setback is the compression. Your comeback is the release. Progress is the prize, not perfection. Perfectionism is not a high standard, it is a trap. It presents itself as rigorous, as evidence of genuine commitment, as the natural disposition of someone who cares about quality. And it uses this disguise to paralyze people who are otherwise capable of extraordinary achievement. Here's how it works. You set a standard that is, by definition, unachievable in the messy, imperfect, iterative reality of actual human performance. You begin pursuing your goal with genuine effort. You produce results that are real, meaningful, and measurable, but imperfect. Your perfectionism interprets this gap between performance and perfection not as normal progress, but as failure. You internalize this failure. You lose motivation. You tell yourself the real effort can begin when you're better prepared, when conditions are more ideal, when you can do it right. And you stop. Not because you lacked ability, not because the goal was wrong, but because you used an impossible standard to transform genuine progress into evidence of inadequacy. This is how perfectionism kills more dreams than failure ever has. What progress actually looks like. Progress is not a straight line. This is one of the most important things to understand about how improvement actually works, and one of the things people most frequently fail to internalize. Progress looks like 3 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, sideways for a week, a plateau so flat and so long you begin to wonder if you're moving at all, then a sudden jump forward that seems to come from nowhere but is actually the accumulated result of the plateau, work materializing in performance. This is the actual shape of learning, of growth, of achievement in virtually every domain. Athletes, musicians, writers, entrepreneurs, scientists, all of them experience this irregular, non-linear, frequently discouraging pattern of development. The person who requires a smooth, continuous, impressive upward trajectory to stay motivated will quit during every plateau. And since plateaus are normal, since they are a predictable physiological and psychological feature of the learning process. The person who requires continuous visible progress will quit repeatedly throughout any serious pursuit. The person who has learned to celebrate any movement, however small, however irregular, however far from perfection, will outlast the plateau. They will be there for the jump. They will compound their progress across months and years while the perfectionist restarts. Micro-progress. The underrated engine begins celebrating micro-progress, not The milestones that others would recognize, not the achievements worth posting about, the private, quiet, almost invisible movements that no external metric tracks. You chose water instead of soda with dinner. That's progress. You worked on the project for 20 minutes instead of procrastinating entirely. That's progress. You had 5% less anxiety in a situation that used to stop you cold. That's progress. You identified a pattern in your behavior that was holding you back. That clarity is progress. These micro movements are not consolation prizes. They are the actual substance of growth. The visible milestones, the finish lines, the launch dates, the numbers on a scale, the account balances, these are simply the accumulated result of micro progress made visible. The micro progress itself is what's real. The milestones are just where you pause to count it. Create a progress tracking practice that captures these micro movements, not a complicated system, a journal, a voice memo, a brief note at the end of each day that answers one question. In what small way am I different today than I was yesterday? Over time, this documentation reveals something astonishing. The person you were a year ago is almost unrecognizable. The gap that felt impossible to close has been closed. The mountain that seemed immovable has been moved, not in a single dramatic push, but in 1,000 small pushes, many of which felt in the moment, like they weren't making any difference at all. Process progress, the most important kind. Of all the types of progress worth tracking, process progress may be the most important and the most neglected. Process progress means you're getting better at how you work, not just what you achieve. You're becoming more consistent, more focused, more deliberate, more honest in your self-assessment, more willing to do uncomfortable things without excessive resistance. These improvements don't show up in your metrics immediately. They show up weeks or months later in the quality and consistency of your results. But they're real, they're earned, and they're worth acknowledging, because acknowledging them is what maintains the motivation to continue refining them. Compare yourself only to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today, not to the idealized version of yourself that perfectionism imagines, to the actual person you were 24 hours ago, or a month ago, or a year ago. This comparison is always meaningful, always accurate, and always available, because you have complete information about both data points. Progress, not perfection, is the fuel that sustains the long journey. Celebrate the progress, acknowledge the movement, trust the compounding, and keep going. Silence. The quitter inside you. The quitter inside you is patient. It doesn't always announce itself loudly. It doesn't always arrive during obvious moments of weakness. Sometimes it waits. It lets you make progress. It lets you build momentum. And then, when you're tired, when you're discouraged, when you're close to something important and the effort required is highest, it surfaces, and it speaks in your most convincing voice, making the most reasonable-sounding arguments, at precisely the moment you're least equipped to resist. This is not a metaphor. This is a description of how the human brain manages competing drives, the drive toward growth and the drive toward safety, and how the safety drive deploys its most sophisticated arguments when the stakes are highest. Understanding this isn't enough to defeat it. You also need a response strategy, a practiced, automatic, non-negotiable response to the quitter's arguments that fires before you have time to be persuaded by them. Recognition is the first weapon. Before you can defeat the quitter inside you, you must learn to recognize it, which is harder than it sounds because it doesn't announce itself as quitting. It announces itself as reason. I've given this enough time. A rational person would know when to move on. The evidence clearly suggests this approach isn't working. I'm not quitting, I'm being strategic about where I invest my energy. There's no shame in recognizing when something isn't the right fit. Every one of these statements might be true in certain circumstances. What makes them the quitter's voice rather than legitimate strategic thinking is the context in which they appear. Specifically, whether they're appearing in response to genuine evidence that a change is needed, or in response to discomfort and difficulty that your system is trying to avoid. Ask yourself, if everything felt easy right now, if the progress were visible and the energy were high, would I be having this thought? If the answer is no, if this thought only appears when things are hard, then it's the quitter talking, not your strategic intelligence. The action response. When you identify the quitter's voice, the response is not argument, not reflection, not journaling about it. Action. Take the next step toward your goal immediately, not a significant step necessarily, the smallest possible step. Pick up the book, open the laptop, put on the shoes, make one call, write one sentence. This action does 3 things simultaneously. It interrupts the voice's momentum. It's very hard to sustain a compelling case for quitting while you're actively doing the thing. It generates a tiny dose of progress-related neurochemicals that begin to shift your state, and it provides immediate counter-evidence to the quitter's argument. The argument says you're done, and you just proved you're not. Movement creates momentum. Momentum creates evidence. Evidence becomes identity. Identity becomes unstoppable. The quitter's peak. One more time, because it bears repeating in its own section, the quitter's voice reaches maximum intensity in the hours and days immediately before breakthrough. If you've been working toward something for months, if the effort has been sustained, if the investment has been real, if the commitment has been genuine, and suddenly the quitter's voice is louder than ever, more convincing than ever, making arguments you find harder to refute than usual. This is a signal to press harder, not to stop. The voice knows. It has been tracking your progress even when you couldn't see it. It knows you're close, and it is making its most desperate move. Recognize the desperation, read it accurately, and respond with the most decisive, purposeful action you've taken in months. Because if the voice is this loud, you are almost certainly about to break through. Non-negotiable standards, the architecture of integrity. Goals describe where you want to go. Standards describe who you are on the way there. This distinction matters more than most people realize. Goals are external. They exist in the future. They depend on factors you can't entirely control. They can be achieved or missed. Standards are internal. They exist right now. They depend entirely on your choices, and they are either honored or violated. Most people have goals. Very few people have standards. Standards are the minimum acceptable level of behavior you demand from yourself in every situation, not when you feel like it, not when it's convenient, not when others are watching. In every situation. The word non-negotiable is not decorative. It is the entire point. What non-negotiable actually means, non-negotiable means that the standard applies under circumstances that would make most people consider an exception reasonable. When you're exhausted, the standard still applies. When no one would know you compromised, the standard still applies. When the stakes seem low, the standard still applies. When maintaining the standard costs you something, time, comfort, approval, the standard still applies. The moment you establish the first exception, you have transformed a standard into a preference. Preferences bend under pressure. Standards hold under pressure. That is the entire functional difference. The holding under pressure is not what standards are for. It's simply what distinguishes them from preferences. The holding under pressure is when standards prove their value. Building your standards architecture. Begin with integrity standards, the foundation on which everything else rests. I keep my word, not usually, not when it's convenient. When I say something will happen, it happens. When I commit, I deliver. When I make a promise, I honor it, especially to myself. I take responsibility for my actions, not partial responsibility, not shared responsibility with circumstances, my choices, my outcomes, my accountability. I tell the truth even when it costs me something. This one is harder than it sounds, because it includes telling the truth to yourself about your performance, your motivations, the gap between your stated values and your actual behavior. Build on this with excellence standards, not perfect results, but genuine effort. In everything I do, I give what I actually have, not what's required to avoid criticism. The standard is effort, not outcome, but it is real effort. Not the performance of effort, but the actual deployment of your actual capabilities. Then add persistence standards. I don't quit because things are difficult. This is different from I never quit. Quitting is sometimes the right strategic choice. The standard is that difficulty, discomfort, resistance, slow progress, temporary failure, is not a sufficient reason to stop. The standard requires an actual strategic reassessment based on real evidence before any course change is considered legitimate. Standards is freedom. Here is the paradox of standards that most people never discover. Non-negotiable standards create freedom, not restriction. When your standards are clear and consistent, an enormous category of decisions simply disappears. You don't spend energy deciding whether to honor a commitment when it becomes inconvenient. You honor it, because that's the standard. You don't agonize over whether to tell the truth when a comfortable lie is available. You tell the truth, because that's the standard. You don't negotiate with yourself about whether to give your genuine effort today. You give it, because that's the standard. The person without clear standards faces these decisions fresh every day, with full access to all the rationalizations available. The person with clear, non-negotiable standards doesn't face these decisions at all. They were decided already. And that pre-decision creates a kind of internal simplicity, a clarity and directness of action that looks from the outside like remarkable confidence. It's not confidence exactly, it's integrity. The alignment between what you say and what you do maintained so consistently that the gap between intention and action has effectively closed. Build one standard, perfect it, then another. Build your character one non-negotiable at a time. Visualize success while living in the difficulty. Your brain cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. This is not philosophical speculation. This is established neuroscience. When you vividly imagine performing an action with specific sensory detail, with emotional engagement, with full mental immersion, the neural activation patterns in your motor cortex are functionally identical to the patterns activated during actual performance. Elite athletes have understood this for decades. Olympic-level performers in every discipline include structured visualization in their training because it works, not as motivational supplementation, but as actual practice. They are literally practicing in their minds, building the neural pathways for performance before executing performance. You can use this same tool, and it is most powerful when you use it in the middle of difficulty. Why visualization matters. Most when things are hardest. Most people, when they visualize at all, do so when things are going well. When motivation is high and progress is visible and the goal feels achievable. This is the neurological equivalent of practicing in perfect conditions and then being surprised when your performance degrades under pressure. Visualization is most valuable and most demanding during difficulty. When you're in the middle of failure, when setbacks are multiplying, when the path is unclear, Maintaining a vivid, detailed, emotionally engaged picture of your successful outcome is the hardest cognitive work there is. It's also the work that separates the people who make it through difficulty from the people who don't. Maintaining the vision while navigating the reality of current struggle creates what psychologists call productive tension. The gap between where you are and where you're going generates energy. It refuses to let you settle into the current difficulty as permanent. It keeps one part of your consciousness connected to possibility while the rest of you deals with what's immediately in front of you. How to visualize effectively? Effective visualization is not a vague, gauzy image of success. It is a specific, multi-sensory, emotionally engaged rehearsal. Visualize the moment of achievement, not just the abstract concept of it. What specifically are you doing? What do you see around you? What do you hear? What does your body feel? What emotions are present? Who else is there, and what are they saying? Include the process as well as the outcome. Visualize yourself persisting through exactly the type of difficulty you're currently facing. See yourself making the difficult call. See yourself continuing when the resistance is highest. See yourself finding the solution. This process visualization is not just motivating. It is rehearsal for exactly the moments that will determine your outcome. Visualize your emotional state during success, not just the circumstances, the feeling, the specific texture of pride, relief, accomplishment, satisfaction. These emotional rehearsals are particularly powerful because your brain responds to emotion more strongly than to information. When you associate the feeling of achievement with the behaviors of persistence, persistence becomes increasingly automatic. Vision as navigation, not escape. The critical distinction in effective visualization, vision, is not escape from current difficulty. It is navigation of current difficulty. You are not imagining success as a way to avoid reality. You are using it as a compass, a constant reference point for where you're headed, that keeps you oriented during the periods when the path is unclear and the destination is not visible. Action without vision produces misdirected effort. Vision without action produces comfortable delusion. The combination, clear vision pursued through consistent, undeterred action, produces the outcomes that most people call extraordinary. See where you're going. Act like someone who's getting there. And the distance between vision and reality will close, as it always does, for the people who refuse to abandon either one. Build your persistence circle. The people who won't let you quit. You cannot sustain extraordinary persistence in genuine isolation. Not because you lack the willpower, but because human beings are neurologically social, are nervous. Systems are regulated in part by the people around us, and the emotional, cognitive, and behavioral influence of those people is constant and largely unconscious. The people you spend the most time with are shaping your persistence whether you acknowledge it or not. They are either raising your threshold for what seems achievable or lowering it, either treating your struggles as normal features of any meaningful journey or treating them as evidence you should reconsider. This isn't about blaming others for your quitting. It's about building an environment that makes persistence the path of least resistance, because your environment matters and you can choose it. Quit enablers versus persistence reinforcers. Quit enablers are often the people who care about you most. They want you comfortable. They want you safe. When they see you struggling, their natural impulse is to reduce the struggle. And if the way to reduce the struggle is to encourage you to stop pursuing the thing that's causing it, that's what they'll suggest. They're not wrong to care. They're wrong in their understanding of what growth requires. Persistence reinforcers are people who understand, usually because they've experienced it themselves, that growth requires discomfort. that setbacks are normal features of any worthwhile journey, and that supporting you means holding you to your own stated commitments, not making it easier to abandon them. These people will challenge you when you're making excuses. They will remind you of your own reasoning when your memory gets selective under pressure. They will tell you the truth when you want comfort, and they will celebrate your genuine progress. Not your performance of progress, but the real thing. Find them, keep them close, build your circle around them. The multiple layers of support. A robust support system is not a single person. It is a network with different layers, each serving a different function. Mentors provide perspective, the view from further down the path you're walking. They've navigated versions of what you're navigating. They can tell you which of your current fears are real and which are features of the process. They provide what you cannot give yourself, the benefit of having already been through it. Peers provide solidarity, the understanding that comes from sharing similar struggles in real time. They normalize your experience. They remind you that what you're going through is not unique to you, which reduces the shame that often accompanies difficulty and increases the courage to continue. Accountability partners provide accountability, specific regular check-ins on whether you're doing what you said you'd do. Not emotional support, not strategic advice. Simply, did you follow through? If not, why not? What's the plan? Believers provide unconditional faith, people who hold your vision even when you can't hold it yourself, who remind you of who you're becoming when you're temporarily blinded by who you currently are. Contributing to others' persistence. The most stable support networks are reciprocal. You cannot only withdraw from the persistence bank, you must also deposit. Be for others what you need for yourself. Challenge their excuses with the same honesty you want applied to yours. Hold their vision with the same faith they hold yours. Celebrate their progress with the same genuine recognition you want for your own. This reciprocity does two things simultaneously. It creates relationships strong enough to sustain the honest challenge that real support requires, and it reinforces your own persistence orientation. It is very difficult to simultaneously encourage someone else not to quit and permit yourself to do so. The role of persistence reinforcer makes you more persistent. Build this circle with intention. Evaluate it periodically. Add to it where there are gaps, and contribute to it at least as much as you draw from it. You are not meant to persist alone. You are meant to persist together with people who understand what you're building and refuse to let you abandon it. Persistence as identity. The final transformation. Everything in this book has been building toward this chapter. All the small wins, the daily disciplines, the system building, the obstacle reframing, the inner voice training, the pain conversion, all of it serves a single ultimate purpose: to move persistence from the category of things you do into the category of things you are. There is a profound and practically important difference between these two categories. When persistence is something you do, a strategy you employ, a tool you reach for in difficult moments, it is subject to the same conditions that all tools and strategies face. It can be forgotten, it can be dropped, it can be deemed inappropriate for the current situation. Under sufficient pressure, when the justifications are sophisticated enough and the discomfort is real enough, the strategy can be set aside. When persistence is something you are, a fundamental component of your identity, a core feature of how you understand yourself, quitting becomes something categorically different. It stops being a difficult choice and becomes an inconsistency with your identity, an incoherence, a betrayal of who you are. Giving up doesn't feel difficult to an identity-level persister. It feels impossible, not because they never want to quit. They do. Not because they never face moments where quitting seems rational. They do. but because quitting has been defined out of the available options by the story they carry about themselves. Building identity through evidence. Identity is not built through affirmation. It is built through evidence. Telling yourself, "I am a person who never quits," in the mirror each morning will not create a persistence identity. It may, in fact, produce the opposite, because the affirmation, unmatched by behavior, highlights the gap between aspiration and reality, which produces discouragement rather than transformation. Identity is built through accumulated behavioral evidence. Every time you persist when you want to quit, you're filing a piece of evidence. Every time you follow through when following through is hard, you're adding a data point. Every time you do the thing you said you'd do in the conditions that make it hardest, you're building a case. Over hundreds and eventually thousands of repetitions, this case becomes compelling. Your brain updates its story about who you are, and once the brain has updated its story, once the identity has genuinely shifted from "I am working on persistence" to "I am someone who persists," the dynamic changes fundamentally. The test of the real identity. Here is how you know when persistence has become genuine identity rather than active effort. What do you do when no one would blame you for quitting? When circumstances are genuinely difficult and your progress is genuinely slow and you have tried genuinely hard and there is a completely defensible case for stopping. What do? Strategy fails under these conditions. Strategy requires the presence of mind to remember to apply it, the energy to overcome the resistance against it, the conviction that the strategy is still the right one. Identity doesn't require any of this. Identity simply is. In the moment when strategy would require a decision, identity has already made one. There is no decision to make because the answer is determined by who you are. This is the transformation that everyone in this book has been pointing toward. This is what the daily disciplines build. This is what the small wins compound into. This is what the standard setting, the system building, the inner voice training, the obstacle reframing is all in service of. The mind that never gives up, not the mind that tries hard to avoid giving up, not the mind that usually doesn't give up, the mind for which giving up is no longer an available option, because giving up would require becoming someone else. And you know exactly who you are. You are someone who finds a way. You are someone who shows up when it counts. You are someone who says "one more time" when everything else says it's over. You are someone whose mind, however tested, however challenged, however pressured, does not quit. You didn't start out this way. You built it, one small decision at a time, one kept commitment at a time, one moment of persistence at a time, until persistence became not something you do, but the most fundamental thing about who you are. And from here, from this identity, built on this evidence, reinforced by this character, there is no goal you cannot pursue, no obstacle you cannot learn from, no setback you cannot build upon. The mind that never gives up belongs to you now. Use it.